For those of you that followed along with me last year, know that we cashed big time on the WNBA. It was just an absolute gold mine for us. I hit literally my first 7 WNBA bets that I ever placed, and I was pretty much hooked from there. So, what I'm going to be doing in this video is teaching you how to bet on the WNBA, and then most importantly, my profitable WNBA betting strategies so we can all cash together. My name is Matt Modi. You are currently watching Jedi Modi Sports Betting. So while you are here, would appreciate it if you could like the video, comment, let me know your thoughts, and then of course subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can also find me on my Twitter handle that you see on the screen here at Jedi Modi. Posted a link to that in the description of the video as well. So when betting on the WNBA, there are 3 main markets that are similar to pretty much any other sport. Not pretty much, similar to literally every other sport. And the 3 main markets are the money line, the point spread, and the total. Every single sport, every single game is going to have some sort of version of these 3 main markets. So let's talk about what those are. So you can see a screenshot here from FanDuel on all 3 of the different markets. And let's start with the money line, because that's the easiest one. So we see money, the middle column on both of these games. When you're betting the money line, you're literally just betting on who you think is going to win the game. It is legitimately the easiest possible bet that you can make in sports. You're just betting on who's going to win. Doesn't matter how they win, doesn't matter how much they win by, just if they win. And what you need to know about the money line is that the minus dictates the favorite and the plus dictates the underdog. And the bigger the numbers are, the bigger the favorite / bigger the underdog. Like we see on the screen here, the 2 examples that I have. We see that the aces are massive favorites, minus 1,200. If you don't know how minus odds work, the number next to it is how much money you would need to risk to profit $100. So for the aces, you would literally need to risk $1,200 to profit $100. Massive favorites. You go a little bit farther down, you see that the Mercury aren't as big of favorites. They are at minus 158. So instead of needing to risk $1,200 to profit 100, you only need to risk $158 to profit 100. And the same is true for the underdog. The bigger the number, the bigger the underdog. The difference is the number next to the plus is how much money you would profit if you risked $100. So for the Sparks, we see that are at plus 680. If you risked $100 on the Sparks and they won, you would profit $680. For the Lynx, we see that they are a significantly smaller number, means that they're a significantly smaller underdog. The plus 128 means that you would win, you would profit $128 if you risked $100 and they won. So this part isn't rocket science, but what you've immediately learned is that if you can identify underdogs that you think have a chance to win straight up, you'll make more money doing so. That part's pretty easy. Next up is the point spread. So no longer are you betting on who you think is going to win straight up. You are betting on how many points you think a team is going to win or lose by. So similar to the underdog, the minus dictates the favorite and the plus dictates the underdog. The number next to the plus and minus is how much a team is favored by or how much they are an underdog by. So for the aces, we see next to the minus is the 13.5. That means the aces are 13.5 point favorites, which means if you bet on them, their point spread, they would have to win by 14 or more points in order for you to win your point spread bet. For the underdog, it's the same, but the opposite. We see it for the Sparks, the plus 13.5. That means they are 13.5 point underdogs. And if you were to bet on them on their spread, they could either, and this part's important, either lose by 13 or fewer points, or they could win straight up. So if you bet on the Sparks and they win straight up, you would win your spread bet. Or they could lose by 13 and you would win your spread bet. And then we see for the next game for the Mercury and the Lynx, we see the Mercury are 3.5 point favorites, which means they would need to win by 4 or more in order for you to win your spread bet on them. And then the Lynx are plus 3.5, which means that they could either win straight up or lose by 3 or fewer. So for the point spread, it's a way for you to back the favorite with a little bit more reasonable odds, not need to risk as much and have better profits. Obviously, there's higher risk And the opposite is true for the underdog. It gives you a chance to back the underdog, but for a little bit safer. So no longer do they need to win straight up. They just need to not lose by however many points they're underdogs by. Now, the next main market is the total. So when you're betting on the total, no longer are you betting on the outcome of the game at all. It doesn't matter who wins or loses. Instead, you are betting on how many points are going to be scored, and you're betting on an over or an under. So for the first game, the Aces versus the Sparks, on the far right here, we see that the total is at 170.5. That means if you were to bet on the over, you would need 171 or more points to be scored. And if you were to bet on the under, you would need 170 or fewer points to be scored. A couple notes here. It doesn't matter who scores the points, and it doesn't matter if the game goes into overtime or not. So if the over only hits because of OT, still counts. Or if the over only hits because one team scored 171 points, it's unlikely, but that would still count towards the over. That'll happen in football sometimes, or baseball, where one team alone will cash the total going over. Now, those are the three main markets: the total, the point spread, and the money line, right? Money line, you're betting on who's going to win straight up. Point spread, you're betting on how many points a team is going to win or lose by. And then for the total, you're just betting on how many points are going to be scored in the game, over or under. Now, there are also alternate markets that you can bet on as well. There are a bunch of different examples of alternate markets, but the most common examples are team totals. So instead of betting on the total, including both teams, you're betting on one individual team and how many points they are going to score, whether they go over or under. And then you can also bet on like first half props. So first half total, first half spread, first half team total. Same thing with first quarter spread, first quarter team total, stuff like that. Those are all examples of alternate markets. And then the WNBA also does offer player props, but very, very limited selection of player props compared to the NBA. So with the NBA, it's basically if there's a counting stat for it, you can bet on it. For the WNBA, it really is just player points, which you can bet on. As you can see on the screen here, FanDuel offering you player points. So those are all the different markets you can bet on. Now I'm going to teach you how to make money betting on the WNBA, because that's the most important thing, right? Cashing off of it. So for the WNBA, my best strategy, my most profitable strategy is going to sound pretty simple. It's literally just line shopping. Now I'll share my screen and explain why, or detail why in a second. But the logic behind that, because the WNBA isn't a very heavily bet sport, you can see some massive discrepancies between the sports books. NBA, NFL, those sports get so much action that the lines are so tight. That's not the case with the WNBA. Because they don't get as much action, the discrepancies between the books are massive. And let me show you what I mean. So here are the markets that I was showing you screenshots of on FanDuel. Aces are 13.5. The total is 170. The links are plus 3.5. The total is 161. Well, let's look at three other sports books, just three, and see what the difference is. Let's go to Caesars. Well, we see the Aces, instead of being 13.5 point favorites, are down to 12.5 point favorites. We see the total is up from 170.5 to 171. Now the links are the same, plus 3.5, but the total is up to 162 as well. So we see a difference. Let's look at what DraftKings looks like. The Aces are again 12.5 point favorites, down from 13.5. The total is again at 171. The links, instead of being 3.5 point underdogs, are only 3 point underdogs, and the total is up to 161.5 as opposed to 160.5. Next book, let's look at BetMGM. Again, the Aces are 12.5. The total is up to 171.5 as well. And with the links, again, they're 3.5 point favorites with the total at 161.5. So just from looking at four sports books, FanDuel has the Aces as 13.5 point favorites, which means the Sparks as 13.5 point underdogs. Every other book, 12.5, 12.5, 12.5. Seems to be a pretty big outlier on if you can get the Sparks at plus 13.5, because that's a full point better than what every other book has. Luckily, there are tools that can do this for you. There's a website that I used to work for called oddsjam.com, which will literally give you all of this information you see on the screen here for completely free. So part of my WNBA betting strategy is literally just line shopping and identifying value across all of the sports books. And you want to see where sharp sports books price it. When I say sharp, I mean sports books that are better than others at pricing odds. That would be Pinnacle, that would be Circa, and that would be BetOnline. If you can get an outlier to all three of these books, that would be a really good bet. That would be something that I would recommend locking in. Like this total here. It's 171, 171.5, or 172 across the board. FanDuel is giving it to us at 170.5. That seems like a really valuable bet to make on FanDuel. Same thing if we go to the other game. We see the spread between 3.5 and 3. We see the total from 160.5 all the way up to 162. Just massive, massive outliers compared to all the different sports books all on one screen, which presents betting opportunities. Now, there are also advanced stats that I like to look at with the WNBA. All you need to do is go to WNBA.com, go to stats, go to teams, and then go to advanced. And there are two things that I like to look at. Net rating just gives you the team's net rating. It's pretty simple. The higher the net rating, the better. Now, I'm recording this at the beginning of the season, so these net ratings are kind of out of whack, but it's not as easy as just looking at total or just looking at total points scored. You want to look at offensive rating and defensive rating. But when it comes to the total itself, the number one factor to whether a total goes over or not is actually the pace of the game, not how good the offenses are. Now, this obviously makes sense because the more shots that go up, the more points that are scored, even if the offenses aren't that good. So I don't make a ton of betting decisions solely based off of this information, but this is the best website that you want to look at if you want to get some advanced stats. And you can go really advanced if you want to. You know, all these different stuff, different types of stats you can look at. But the main two that I look at personally is net rating and pace specifically for the total. And that's pretty much it. So we've learned how to bet on the WNBA, and we've learned how to make money doing so. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, comment, and let me know if you have any questions. Other than that, as I mentioned, remember to like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit me up at my Twitter handle that you see on the screen here. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.